Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning, grab your phone, and the first headline you see says this: U.S. naval blockade in effect. Iran threatens retaliation. Oil prices surge past $100. This is not science fiction. This is not a Hollywood movie. This happened, and it just happened. On April 13, 2026, the United States imposed a full naval blockade on all Iranian ports, a military operation without modern precedent, an action analysts are already comparing to the most dangerous crises of the Cold War. And the world was left in shock. Because right now, in the Strait of Hormuz, a stretch of water just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the fate of 20% of the world's oil supply is at stake. The price you'll pay to fill up your car is at stake, your electricity bill, the economic stability of entire nations. But there's one question no one can answer yet. Will this stop, or will it explode? Stay until the end of this video, because what you're about to hear today could completely change how you see the world we live in. To understand what's happening now, you need to understand what happened over the past few weeks, because this didn't start on April 13th. This goes back, way back. Since February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel have been in open war with Iran, a war that started in a limited way, but quickly escalated into one of the most serious crises of the 21st century. From the very beginning of the conflict, Iran made a brutal strategic decision to close the Strait of Hormuz, or at least control it. Iranian authorities announced that any ship wanting to pass through the strait would have to pay a fee to Iran, a kind of wartime toll. Trump called it what it is: global extortion. And for weeks, ships from multiple countries were forced to choose: pay Iran or don't pass. Alternative routes exist, but they are long, expensive, and slow. Going around Africa adds weeks to every voyage. The Suez Canal has its own complications. The result? Shipping costs skyrocketing, oil prices rising, markets on edge worldwide. Then came the weekend of April 11th and 12th. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance traveled to Islamabad, Pakistan, to sit down with Iranian representatives, the first direct talks between the two countries since 1955, the most important since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. For 21 hours, the teams negotiated, the world waited, and there was hope. Some diplomats said a deal was close, but no agreement was made. Iran's foreign minister said that just as they were nearing a deal, the Americans changed the terms. They introduced what he called maximalist demands. The Iranians felt the positions kept shifting, like the ground was moving beneath their feet. Vance left Islamabad without a deal, and before leaving, he delivered a clear message: "This is our final and best offer. We'll see if Iran accepts it." Iran did not accept. And that's when Trump made the decision no one expected, or maybe everyone expected. On Sunday, April 12th, Trump posted on social media, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m., a blockade goes into effect." And the next day, at 10 a.m. Washington time, 3 p.m. in Lisbon, the blockade began. U.S. Central Command issued a direct warning: any ship entering or leaving Iranian ports without authorization would be subject to interception, diversion, and seizure. The blockade covered Iran's entire coastline, the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Arabian Sea east of the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump went even further. In a social media post, he warned that any Iranian vessel attempting to interfere with the blockade would be, and I quote, "immediately eliminated." The most aggressive U.S. blockade in decades had begun. Now comes the part experts are watching very closely, because declaring a blockade is one thing, enforcing it is something entirely different. And Iran has already made its position clear. An Iranian military spokesman said, and these words matter, that if the security of Iranian ports is threatened, no port in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea will be safe. Security analysts are interpreting this statement in multiple ways, and here we enter the realm of possibilities. What could happen next? Hypothesis 1. Attacks on Gulf state ports. Iran has the capability to strike ports in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, ballistic missiles, kamikaze drones, proxy forces across the region. If Tehran decides to act, the consequences would be immediate. Dubai, one of the world's largest commercial hubs, would be at risk. Saudi oil, which supplies much of the planet, could be disrupted. Experts warn this would mark the most dangerous escalation so far. Hypothesis 2. IRGC fast attack boats. Iran has lost much of its conventional naval fleet. Trump claimed 158 vessels were destroyed. But what it still has are so-called fast attack boats, small, agile craft capable of striking and disappearing quickly. Military analysts believe these could be used to harass ships trying to pass through the blockade zone. Not necessarily to sink them, but to create chaos, to make the blockade unworkable. Hypothesis 3. Mine activation. Iran has placed mines in the Strait of Hormuz. The British have already deployed mine countermeasure vessels to the region, one of the UK's few military contributions to this conflict. If Iran activates more mines or lays new ones, maritime traffic could become nearly impossible, even if the blockade is technically lifted. But there's another dimension to the escalation that few are talking about, and it may be the most important of all: China. Beijing is the world's largest importer of Iranian oil. With the US blockade, that supply stops. China loses a critical energy source, and China will not stay silent. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry has already criticized the blockade, urging both Iran and the US to not reignite the war. But analysts believe the real pressure from China will happen behind the scenes: diplomatic channels, economic pressure, or even naval movements in the region. Think about this. If China decides its economic interests require the US blockade to fail, what tools does Beijing have? It's a question strategists in Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin are asking right now, and there is no easy answer. Now you need to understand something critical. The United States did this largely alone. Before the blockade, Trump said other countries would help, that allies were working to prevent Iran from selling oil. But when the day came and the world's cameras were fixed on the Strait of Hormuz, the allies didn't show up. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was direct in an interview with the BBC. "We are not supporting the blockade. My decision was very clear. Regardless of the pressure, and there was considerable pressure, we will not be drawn into war." Starmer said the UK's focus is reopening the strait, not blocking Iranian ports. The UK has mine-clearing vessels and anti-drone systems in the region, but will not participate in the US blockade. Think about the weight of that statement. The UK is America's closest ally. It fought alongside the US in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this time Starmer said no. Germany said no. France said no and went further. President Emmanuel Macron not only refused to support the blockade, but announced France and the UK will co-organize an international conference to create a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. A mission that, note this, is completely different from the US blockade. The European approach is to reopen the strait through diplomacy, not unilateral military force. Spain was even critical. Spain's defense minister said the blockade makes no sense, calling it another episode in this downward spiral. Turkey, a NATO member, called for the strait to be reopened as soon as possible through negotiations, not a blockade. And on top of that, criticism from the UN. The head of the UN's maritime agency was absolutely clear. No country has the legal right to prohibit innocent passage or freedom of navigation in international straits used for global transit. Legally, this is significant. The US blockade could violate the law of the sea, and that opens the door to international legal disputes that could last decades. But perhaps the most surprising moment of this crisis was something else: the Pope. Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope in history, had repeatedly called for peace, reconciliation, and dialogue. And Trump responded. On social media, he called the Pope weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy, and added, "I don't want a pope who criticizes the President of the United States." The Pope replied calmly, "I am not afraid of the Trump administration." We're talking about a US president in open conflict with NATO, the UK, France, Germany, Spain, Turkey, China, and the Pope at the same time. Say what you want about Donald Trump, but one thing is undeniable. This man is not afraid to stand alone. Let me be direct with you, because so far we've talked about countries, presidents, and militaries, but this affects you directly, and you need to understand how. Oil. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical energy choke point. In normal times, about 20% of all oil consumed globally passes through it every single day. With the strait blocked or disrupted, that energy has to take another route, longer, more expensive, and more uncertain. The result? On the very day the